Good. Hello, and thanks for watching another Sunday case study. I am so sorry to everybody that's had to wait 2 weeks for your Sunday palmistry goodness. And thank you so much for sticking with me for all the support. I've been receiving a lot of emails, a lot of comments from those of you that have been watching avidly, and it's kind of reminded me the reasons why I do this so consistently. I've been making a promise to myself to hit that kind of criteria, that quota of a video a week at least. And that's because it helps me develop as well as helps others. And I'm hoping I'm helping them teaching and learn, others are learning and growing with me. And we've got this kind of growing community. And I'm just so grateful and appreciative of all of the support, but also everyone sticking by me and with me through this journey that is ongoing. I have no desire to stop. It's just that I kind of dropped a ball because things are difficult at the moment. I've got 4 dogs. I, live with my partner. I try and spend as much time with her because we both work quite a lot. I have a full-time job and I also have my part-time job, which is palmistry. If you look on my website and you try and book, you can only do it on a Wednesday, and that's because I can commit to 1 day a week on palmistry, and then I also have my nan-in-law, whom me and my partner and my mother-in-law we look after 24/7. There's always someone with us. So things are really difficult. And on top of that, my mental health has been struggling a little bit. So I just kind of had to put something aside and look out for me. And I've just taken a bit of extra time to spend on myself and heal a little bit. So, and also I think because the nature of this role, palmistry, you kind of have to be sensitive. You have to let things in. And with that, there is something of a danger in if you're not safeguarding yourself, then you're in danger of letting, becoming emotionally kind of overburdened, and soaking things up, becoming something of a punch bag. Maybe that's not the right way to say it, but you need to know how to release as well as take things on. You need to know how to let things go, and when to put your walls up and when to drop them. And it's just really, I've been finding that I've been soaking up a bit too much recently. So that's kind of on me. And I'm fully aware of that. But thank you so much for all of your support, all of your emails, all of your comments. It's really reminded me as to why I do this and my kind of committed sort of criteria, my quota, which is at least 1 video a week. The reason why I want to do that is because not only am I now certain that I'm helping others grow, people are growing together and with me, I'm growing as well. I'm developing as well. These videos help me because I learn every time I do them. And it also helps me stay on top of my own communication skills, which is imperative as a palmist. So thank you. Now, enough babbling. This week, I'm going to be looking at the hand of Thomas Edison. I'll show you a picture. Here he is, pretty grumpy guy. I've got the same left-hand image here. And, considering that it's, what, 125 years old, 126 years old, it's a good image. Now, here are the backs of his hands. Now, this image certainly is 126 years old. I'm not certain about the other image, but it's roughly that. And I thought it was cool because last Sunday case study I did Nikola Tesla, and I'm going to focus on Thomas Edison and really talk about who he was as a person, um, and how his kind of character traits and personality traits, his skill set can be seen in the hand, and how he kind of got where he was. But also, I'm going to do a little bit of comparison here because his rival Nikola Tesla, who I read the hands of last time, um, differs so much. I want to show why and how they differ. Then they're both left hands, and when we look at the left hands, we're looking at the internal, our secrets, our thoughts, our fears, our desires, and our aspirations. And the left hand really shows us a very personal reflection, a true image of who we are. It's very personal palmistry, which is why it's no party trick. It's not something that, you can just do on a night out or at a hen party. It's really not something, because I was asked this recently, would I do hen parties? And initially I said, well, I'm open to it, but actually on reflection, It's not something I'm not willing to reduce palmistry to, a party game. It's not. It's very personal, it's very in-depth, it's a science, it requires analysis, and it's not the right setting for it either. So, you know, I'm really looking forward to this reading because I think that a few things are gonna come out, and, it's just great for having these case studies as examples so that we can put them into kind of a real life reflection and practice. My only real wish here is, I mean, considering these are so old, 126 years or so, they are in excellent condition. I just wish we had color. I mean, beggars can't be choosers. I mean, really, come on. I shouldn't be wishing for all that much. Now, I see liver spots here, and these are obvious signs of a drinker. But before we get into any of that, I just wish I knew if this was discoloration of looks like anemia, and I wish this was, if I could see the reddening of the tips of the fingernails, or if this is just dirt. I don't know. But the fingernail shape themselves are interesting because they are spatulate, and these stand for action. And wherever we see that in the fingernails, it's often in the need to create. It's often in the need to utilize our physical energies to make something happen. And just that kind of that feeling of, I need to get going, I need to do something is always there with people who have a very spatulate fingernails. And all of his fingernails are spatulate. They stand for action. He is a man of action. But the interesting thing I've noticed is inventors, pioneers, generally have spatulacy in their hands in one of two ways in the palms, and that is by having a broad-topped spatulate hand, as in having the top of the palm is wider and kind of fans out, like we see in Nikola Tesla's hand, or we see the base of the hand wider. And I don't know why I'm circling Thomas Edison here because I don't see that in his hands. Now, when the base of the palm is wider, it shows a need to make great change, a need to um, adapt to challenges, to be thrown in challenging environments, to read the rule book and then rewrite it. It's someone who is just, in a need to create change physically because the base of the palm speaks for the physical, whereas the top of the palm speaks for something much more mental and spiritual and emotional, which is why Nikola Tesla was much more of an idealist, a philosopher, which is why he ended up in actually the end of his life is a very sad tale when you look at someone and their efforts and the lack of recognition that he received and potentially just being murdered and left in a kind of a destitute place and all of his work stolen. Whereas Thomas Edison, he doesn't have that kind of classic hallmark of a pioneer, of an inventor, of a creator. He doesn't have that, an explorer even. You see the wider base with the explorers as well. We don't see any of this. In fact, what we see here is, for me, this is quite clearly a sensual hand. And sensual hands often stand for the material and for um, they often have big personalities and they utilize their charisma to get where they need to. They understand the human condition on quite an innate level, and they have those kinds of social kind of manipulative qualities, not necessarily in a bad way, but they know how to talk in circles and at social events. They know how to network, and it's who you know after all. They also satisfy the physical, and they really, they understand the human condition because they understand the pleasures of life so well themselves. So they kind of know what make people tick. They kind of know the every facet, generally speaking, of what makes each person tick and how to understand each person. What angle can I work this person? And they kind of move on to the next. So, and they kind of know what to say and when in any given circumstance. in order to really utilize the most out of that situation. I'm not really selling sensual hands in a good light here, am I? But this is just a summary, and other things will enhance or negate this. And not every sensual hand is gifted, socially speaking, and everyone has different strengths and qualities. But the base of the fingers, notice how they are more well developed, and they kind of taper fairly gently, especially Jupiter and Mercury. And um, these are just really sort of hallmark features of the sensual hand as well. Very conic Jupiter and Mercury fingers in particular. The gentle kind of tapering, that soft kind of less resilient texture to the palm. They're often fire hands as well, a long palm and short fingers, which we certainly see here. And so there's more kind of fire, there's more inspiration, there's more character, strong persona, and there's more energy as well. There's more of a spark, there's fire here. But the widened third phalanges of all the fingers enhances that kind of physical need of the physical realm. So the need to kind of satiate physically and gain control with gratifying those physical desires, alcohol, um, womanizing, food and drink, and securing the home comforts, um, and to make sure we live in a nice big home, um, to dress in fine clothing, and also to have the freedom of independence, to have that wealth really increases our independence as well. And that's kind of in a nutshell, really, what these third phalanges represent on that kind of widened phalange level, if that makes sense. I hope some of you are following me here. And when we look at a sensual hand, often one of the key coping mechanisms when we're looking at psychology is an unhealthy relationship with food, and this can be seen by a widened space between Jupiter and Saturn, as well as Apollo and Mercury. Now, when the fingers are held in a very natural position, we can see there's a physically large gap between these, the first and the fourth fingers. Then we can really start to build a conclusion around unhealthy eating. And then if you look at the Venus mount, is it well developed? Yes, it is. Another key trait of a sensual hand. This is desire. And because we know we already have physical desire locked down as one of our kind of, bullet points on our corkboard, then we can again, this compounds this conclusion further. And now another one, if we look at the lifeline, is it wide? Is it deep? Is it kind of darkened? Is it pronounced? Is it showing up in a way that's uh, m- deeper and more meaningful? Yes, to everything I've just said. In this image in particular, and perhaps that's the angle of this image and the way it's taken. But it certainly seems as though the lifeline is wide, it's deep, it's deeply ingrained. So again, this means the life's energies are slowed. This is um, unhealthy, an unhealthy lifestyle, and often through diets. Often it's obesity, and often as well it's potentially alcoholism or drug taking. It's or lack of exercising. We don't have to be, um, overeating necessarily to have a poor, um, you know, bodily function. And one of the key differences between Tesla and Edison is the middle fingers. Notice how Apollo and Saturn lean in towards each other. And they do so with Tesla as well. But notice the space in between the two. In a very natural way here, we're looking at hands, very natural finger leanings here, luckily, in both images. I'm quite certain that these are, um, these the images are revealing on a very subconscious level quite a lot of natural, reliable information. The space between Saturn and Apollo here is significantly large, and this shows someone who has a need to isolate, someone who is quite solitary by nature, a bit of a loner, essentially. Now, Edison doesn't quite have that. In fact, I would say the space between these two is smaller than the first and fourth fingers. Jupiter and Mercury have a wider space between the fingers next to them than these middle two. And so this is another kind of classic sign of essential hand, someone who is a social butterfly. This is often seen in fire hands as well. So whereas Tesla really stood for the ideological, the philosophical, what he wanted to do was make change for a future. He wasn't even interested in his legacy even. He was more interested in what he could do for the planet and the world. He was way ahead of his time spiritually, ideologically, philosophically, as well as technologically. He was so gifted, so intelligent. Whereas Edison stood for the here and now, kind of needed to gratify what he could do in this life, um, and reputation didn't matter so much. And we can see that because Apollo um, is not actually, I would say, all that long. It's not short, but it's a good length, but it's not overly long. In fact, I would say Tesla's Apollo finger is longer. Maybe reputation did matter more to Tesla than it did Edison. But certainly what we can see mattered more was his ability to um, act out his ideas in the here and now in a way that was very physical and grounded, and what he could do in the present environmentally, materialistically. One of the key differences is the thumb here. It's very straight. It sort of protrudes out of the hand in almost a way that reveals it doesn't belong. It sort of doesn't look like it's part of this person's actual hand. When I look at it, and I sort of isolate it in my mind, I can't. It just doesn't look like it fits, which is potentially how he was so able to achieve what he did in quite a brutish, bullheaded manner. There's no tact. There's no tact here. Um, which is interesting because I've mentioned he kind of understands human condition, and he's very social. He understands people. He understands marketing. He's much more gifted psychologically. He understands on a much greater social level. Whereas Tesla was the opposite. Tesla couldn't fit in. He couldn't understand people. His heartline, shows us this, that he had a very deep feeling, a profound ability to feel, but an inability to connect on a one-to-one human level. And this is because he really struggled socially. He was likely on the spectrum. I would say I'm 95% certain about that. The way that Edison's thumb juts out of his hand like this, it's stubborn, it's heavy, it's self-assured, it's going to achieve. It's short as well. It's shorter than Tesla's. So he's not as in his own head. He's a doer, much more of a doer than a thinker. And I would argue that certainly he's an intelligent man. There's no doubting that. I mean, the ridiculously long Mercury finger can be seen here as well as a very long headline. But the thumb isn't quite as long. He's not as deep a thinker. He's not as philosophical. He's not as caught in his own thoughts. And he's certainly not disabled by his feelings. I find it interesting that we have a marriage line. It appears to be a marriage line, a relationship line that reaches outwards and upwards towards Mercury like this. This is a sign of someone who has engaged in a committed long-term relationship, but who has not married. Now, for the age and time that this person, Thomas Edison, was living in, this is very rare. Did he have someone on the side? Just like Tesla, his Jupiter and Apollo fingers are level, just about. I mean, perhaps Jupiter's a tiny bit longer. An even length of Jupiter and Apollo fingers is a sign of fame in palmistry. At the age of 24, he really claimed his independence. maybe 25. Now, I know at 17 he got his first job, but it wasn't until he was around about 24, 25 that he really claimed his independence. So I suppose in those times, even if you had a job, especially at that age as well, you're still not truly independent. And I suppose the same could be said now, in fact, especially with the way wages have gone. And, it's likely that this newfound independence came from his first patent at the age of 22. So this really enabled his ability to uh, be more free, physically, realistically, practically speaking. So I think money, obviously, I think he understood. I think he was a very industrious person, as well as um, absolutely being very gifted in the logical sense. His headline, just like Albert Einstein's, is wonderfully creative. And in fact, there are quite a lot of similarities with Albert Einstein's hands. If you want to check out his palm reading, I've read his hand as well on one of my Sunday case studies. Now, a long headline, in contrast with a long Mercury finger, is another sign of high intelligence. And he certainly has a long Mercury finger. And the headline is long. But, and here's the thing, it doesn't travel as far as a lot of other people's headlines. The length of a headline alone is not, one factor in measuring a person's IQ. You can't just say, well, a long headline means highly intelligent. But it does explain how a person thinks. It explains a kind of an obsessive quality. Now, that's something that Nikola Tesla had. He was obsessive, but Edison is very creative. He's very able to boldly and quite brutishly say, "Well, what if we do this? No, we're doing this." Um, but his headline stops underneath hollow, and this is a very materialistic way of thinking. This is a very um, he's not thinking. He's thinking of the here and now. He's not thinking about, well, what happens after I die? What happens to my children's children? What happens to every other person's children? What about a wider picture? What about the world? And that's the sort of picture that Tesla was thinking about. He was thinking far off into the future and beyond than anyone else was. He wasn't born for his time. And I shouldn't be talking about Nikola Tesla too much in this reading because it is mostly about, or it should be about Edison, but I wanted to make a comparison here. I felt like it was relevant. In any case, Thomas Edison has those real hallmarks of creativity that an inventor should have and needs. There's no doubting that he was a remarkable inventor, but he doesn't have that drive to make change to the world, to impact, to make the world a better place. Those are not his driving aims. His aims are to make money, essentially. Those are his aims, pure and simple. He utilized his talents, his skill set, in a brilliant way, but in probably quite a brute force way. And I say that because of the thumb. The thumb, the way it kind of brutally juts out of the hand as though it doesn't belong, shows us this is someone with this is someone who you don't want to mess with, really. He's intelligent enough to find a way to get what he wants. Um, this is someone you don't really want to cross the path of. Now, anyone who has a sun line that begins on outer Mars and rises, curling upwards, rising towards the sun mount, it shows someone who has the kind of resilience and determination to achieve their aims, their goals, by any means necessary. This is seen on the hand of Rupert Murdoch. It's not a great sign on the hand of someone who is potentially dangerous, not to be trifled with, because they will steamroll over anyone to get where they want to be. Can't make out the career line, the fate line, duty, destiny line. I can't make it out all that well, unfortunately. I can see something of a health line here. I can see something of a money line, understandably. We've talked about materialism. I can see something of a business line as well. And this appears to be 45. What happened at this age, 45? So I'm just looking at a timeline of events here. Concentrated activity on electromagnetic ore separation work around that time for a span of 6 years. More work on phonograph, development of storage batteries. So he was furiously busy at this time, very industrious time. In fact, probably the most industrious time of his life. And that explains why we have this, sorry, just here, why we have this business line. It's a very industrious line. It's highly centered around logic business and that ability to make the most of those faculties. Can't help but think, coming back to this, in his, I don't know, this is odd for me to see a marriage line like this, a relationship line that curves upwards like this, is a clear sign of someone who is in a committed relationship but doesn't never marries. It doesn't materialize into a marriage. Now, important that I remember this is the left hand. So it could be that his right hand, in fact, shows the same marriage line, but it shows differently. It could be that, in fact, he did not wish to marry again after this time, and this is kind of the um, widower sign. That could be what I'm seeing here. The feeling here of I don't wish to marry again. I'm going to remain abstain from involving myself and just work. I could be wrong about that, but we're looking at the left hand. So it's important to understand. I keep reminding myself that although this is someone who stands for practicality and environmental and physicality, what I can do for myself physically in the present, we're looking at the left hand, and everything that affects this person and speaks for this person here is very internal. So this industrious kind of energy that he's producing at around about the age of 45, he's furiously utilizing his kind of industrious scientific um, traits, personality, skill set, and really making the most of his abilities at this time. And it really shows how he feels about his work at this time. So again, just looking at his timeline to see what I can understand a bit more and relay what I'm seeing in his hand to any kind of relevance. At 37, his first wife dies. At 39, he remarries. So this curvature of this first line here could be his first wife. He's outliving his first wife. This is often a sign of that. It's really difficult for me to see from hands alone here, which is why I'm kind of using the backup of timeline. Um, and this it doesn't really make any sense to me because there should be a line directly after this, almost kind of you know just so close to it, it almost looks as if it's joined in an image like this, with a very different outcome. Straight across the hand, maybe drooping down a little, maybe rising up a little. But it's really quite far away and it rises upwards. So maybe his feelings about his second wife was actually just for show. Maybe he was advised to remarry, not be alone. Maybe it was just purely a status thing. But his feelings about his second wife were just not the same. Maybe he, on a very kind of practical level, outside of the home, in social settings, he was with his wife, but behind closed doors, they were separated. In any case, his feelings about marriage here show that he is alone. There's quite a lot of anger I see here because inner Mars is really well developed. Yes, there is a strong sense of desire. What we see of the Venus mount is really strong, full, pronounced, developed. Again, this is a very sensual key trait to the sensual hand, but there is quite a lot of anger here. And this is in part how he was so motivated and driven. This is his fuel to rebuild when things go wrong and really funnels into his ambitious nature. But there were certainly moments of anger in his life. Interestingly, you can actually see at the age of 37, this little line here that comes in from the inside of the domestic sphere here, in between inner Mars and Venus, we can see an obstruction to his life and the way his lifeline changes after this time. This is his first wife. Uh, the death of his first wife at 37. For me, the lifeline and the way it kind of presents itself after this time is very telling because it shows that there's a lacking of. I mean, it's potentially he became depressed at this time and stopped eating as much. Maybe he lost a lot of weight here. I'm wondering. Um, and in his sort of 60s, he really put weight back on again, despite having remarried 2 years later. I think he was very depressed. So I mentioned anger. I'm jumping here and there, but 25, I would say there's a moment of real anger, and this is from family, and this is nothing I've read in any kind of anything online. This is purely from what I'm seeing in the hands here. This is a moment of anger, and there's a secondary one here, and it's. I feel like there's a reason why he left home. He wasn't happy with his parents. They weren't happy with him. There's a disagreement here. There's that feeling, that need for environmental freedom, um, money, that need to make money likely came from a very real circumstance at home. He probably felt he had to leave home and then he needed money. So that need, that ambition to make money came from a very real and practical place. I mean, it's kind of silly now I think about it to try and compare the two. Tesla and Edison were completely different people and worlds apart in terms of their ethics, their aims, and how they went about their work. Edison was about making money, and now I look at his hands, I can see a lot more as to why. I can kind of understand his psychology at least. I'm looking at the left hand only, and I can see where he was coming from a lot more now. I think before, having only looked at Tesla's hand, I was Team Tesla, and I still am really. But and it's not really, it shouldn't be a comparison or competition. But now I feel like I can understand Edison a lot more. I can sympathize actually a lot more as to why he he went about what he did, and I can understand the root aim, the roots in why he wanted to achieve what he did. But I'm not sure as to how he went about it. I think he was a bit of a bully, and um, and I say that in part because of, notice how the Jupiter mount is higher than the rest. Pride, ambition, and ego were in some ways overriding factors when we are absorbed by the material, the present, and gaining on a very physical, material level. That brutish thumb, the sun line that comes from a place of tactics and um, resilience, determination. I think Thomas Edison was a bit of a scary guy, to be fair. I think he was actually a little bit, you know, pretty scary. Um, whereas Tesla probably would have come across as someone who was a bit of an oddball, um, that you just sort of stay away from because he's odd. And that's how probably people might have seen him. I think he was totally misunderstood. Whereas I think Edison had that understanding of others and the way the world works in a way that Tesla just didn't, unfortunately. Tesla was just too far ahead of his time. So, that's my reading slash comparison of the last week and this week, which is not something I'm going to continue to do because it was a bit of a mess, wasn't it? And I'm sorry it wasn't a great reading this week, but next week I'm going to be reading. Who am I doing next Sunday? So, in a bid to catch up with my Sunday case studies, it's only fair, you've been waiting all that long. Tomorrow, as it happens at the time of this reading, will be Sunday. So, I will be doing, I think I'm going to do Kiera nightly. Then I will do my Christmas reading. We'll do someone a bit more special. We'll do we'll do the Queen. That's who we're going to do. Now, the reason why I'm going to do Keira Knightley for the next Sunday case study is because I've been watching a Netflix show at the moment, and I just thought, hang on a minute, there's an odd feature here. I'm going to look at your hands. So that's why I'm going to do that. Let me know what your thoughts are on this reading. And thank you again for all of your continued support and all your comments. I really do appreciate this community that we've built together. Thank you so much for sticking with me. And please continue to. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.